Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Well, hello folks. Welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism on another Sunday morning. I hope this finds you all well and you're looking forward to this show as much as we are. Among my other guests, I've got Kenny MacAskill here today, and I have to say I'm also joined by Iain Lawson. I'm sorry to say that Jason Michaels can't join us today, that hopefully he'll be back in his situ next week. But before I forget, because techies always tell me I've got to remind you all, if you're watching, if you haven't already subscribed, could you hit the subscribe button and the wee bell to make sure that you never miss another show? Okay, see, that's good. Yeah, click the subscribe button. Iain, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Good afternoon, Roddy. Yep, I'm fine. I'm looking forward to some interesting discussion and some interesting topics this afternoon. And hopefully by the end of the show, we'll still be free. There'll have been no knock on the door from the Scottish Police, but we'll wait and see.
I tell you what, gin doesn't taste the same in a mug. It really doesn't. Coffee, folks. Honestly, I kid straight not get coffee. I've got my coffee. I've got my buddy. We've got Techie, and we've got lots to talk about, Iain. And there is no doubt. I mean, I was just before we went live there, my Twitter feed is on fire. And sorry, folks, if I don't reply to you all, because it literally is on fire. And most of it is about Marion Miller and the outrage, and rightly, the outrage of all that's happened today. What have you made of it all?
Well, I mean, I've been speaking about this since it happened. I get angrier by the day. I think the really worrying thing is we tried, Roddy, today. We should be open and honest with people watching this programme. We tried today to get certain women to come and take part in this discussion.
Yep.
And we couldn't get one because they were petrified. They were living in fear. They were unwilling to appear in this programme or indeed to write a blog about the position because they have been well and truly intimidated. And we really need to do something about this, folks, because we can't live in a Scotland where people are scared and intimidated and not being able to speak out about what they know to be wrong. And if we allow it to happen, then we're going to end up like some other countries who, did not do enough when the time came. In Eastern Europe, they had an excuse. I mean, they had tanks rolling down their streets. They were a subjected people. They had no choice. But we have a choice here in Scotland, and the choice is either to fight or to submit to this level of intimidation. Now, I have to say, I've lived, I'm 68 years of age. I never ever thought for a minute this could happen in Scotland. But worse, I never ever believed it could happen under an SNP government.
Yeah.
But here we are, and it is happening, and we need to do something about it.
Yep.
What's your own view, Roddy?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, on you've highlighted that we tried to get some ladies to come on because this is a subject that absolutely appertains to them. But I've also had a friend who will remain nameless, who is writing a blog that I will publish this week on my site. But she's doing it under a pseudonym because she's terrified that these people come, and that annoys me from the point of view is that they're slightly winning because their intimidation is beginning to work. Gentlemen who are watching this show, it is time for you to step up to the plate. Those of you who have got wives, daughters, mothers, sisters, nieces, this fight's for us all. And if we stand by, oh, well, it's a ladies thing, nah, it's not for me, then our sisters and mothers and daughters and wives and our future, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren are going to suffer if we don't do anything about it. We have to fight back. Now, I wrote a blog, as you know, yesterday, where I'm saying that we need to, go after these people. Absolutely go after these people and fight back. We can't sit back and let them dictate everything because that's what's happening up to now.
Indeed. I mean, we need to have, I know there's been a lot of talk about funds. I think anybody so far that's had to fight back about this has been able to crowdfund it relatively easily. got a bit more serious yesterday when GoFundMe pulled out of the Marion Miller one because they'd signed some Stonewall charter or whatever.
Yeah.
But we can't have a situation where Stonewall's controlling the ability of people to defend themselves in court. That's just unacceptable. It can't happen.
No.
So, but I don't think people in that situation will find it difficult, because the vast majority of people in Scotland, when given the information about this, are very firmly on the side of the person who's been persecuted. So I think there'll always be money available for that. But I think we need to go further. I think we probably need a fund so that action can be taken against malicious prosecution, and we actually pursue
exactly what I was advocating yesterday. Absolutely.
Who are making these allegations. You know, they are doing so in the full knowledge that they have no financial implication. They make the allegations, the state takes over, and the state pick up the cost. The defendant picks up the full cost themselves. That's unacceptable. So to balance that up, what we need to have is a fund where we can take civil action against the people who are making these malicious allegations, and we can take them for whatever they've got to be taken for. And that will be a deterrent to this sort of behaviour, because we need to remember this hasn't happened yet. You know, that the hate crime bill isn't in yet. It's only going to get worse when that happens. I'll now transfer it. You keep it going, Roddy, and I'll go and find my phone and switch off. Okay.
We have to do this because, but I can't stress enough to the men watching this show. When you see a pile-in against a lady on social media, in Facebook or in Twitter, you have to join in. Don't stand back. These people must not get away with the bullying and the intimidation of women. And between now and this case going to court in Glasgow in July the 20th, I believe it is, we have got to organise. We have got to be ready to show our support to Marion. Be there. We've also got to make sure that she's got the best legal defence that's possible. And any other ladies in the intervening times that are attacked by these people, but they would like to attack in packs against a single one at a time. And as I say, we know of several women who've already been intimidated away from participating, not just in this show, but writing blogs about being active, scared to say what they say. This is Scotland. I mean, that's what I find the hardest part in all of this, is that, you know, this, if we go back to just 2014, when we had our civic nationalism, our inclusive, a wonderful referendum where everyone was happy, and it was very kumbaya, and we were happy, and, you know, it was like flower power of the 1960s, showing my age again, like the hippie time. It was all wonderful, and love and peace and inclusivity. And then what's happened since? Well, what's happened since we know. And, you know, we have to call out what it is. There was a change of leadership. There was a change of direction. Independence no longer was the main aim. Gender politics became the main name. And this whole Stonewall thing was brought in, which has brought in hate, division, abuse, bullying. A former leader on charges that were kicked out by a jury, still being retried every day by these people because they hide behind anonymity from the court, while he has no anonymity. Well, try that. You'll be thinking there's gin in my cup now. That he cannot hide, while they keep abusing him and they keep rerunning the trial, where we're getting journalists thrown into prison. Where was your phone? In Barhead? Did you go from Paisley to Barhead to get your phone?
No, I had to see who was phoning me. That's the trouble. It was my youngest daughter.
That's different. You've got to see your daughter. Anyway, so that's where we're at. That we've got to defend, we've got to unite, and we've got to be one Iain. And I, like you, have confidence that the Scottish public will buy into this. And we've got to find. So I'm looking now for people to get in touch with me. I'm looking for people to volunteer to be trustees, people who can find us a source that I don't know who's not in the Stonewall Charter when it comes to GoFundMe or any of these other crowdfunding companies. Does someone know that? Let us know. You anything to add to that, Iain?
Only that I know from my own personal life experience just how terrible it can be when freedom of speech is denied to you.
Yeah.
You know, when you can't, even in the privacy of your own home, speak openly about issues because, the children in your home are being asked when they go to school about what was said between their parents. I've lived and worked in countries where that was the case for 50 years, and it's a shattering experience when you can't trust your neighbour, you can't trust anyone. And that's the type of secret society, intimidated society that's been built here in Scotland at the moment. I can't stress how serious this is. I can't think of any issue in all my life that's been more serious. You don't recognise the value of freedom of speech, freedom of expression until it's no longer there. And those who seek to deny people that are evil. There's no other word for it. They are evil. And they must be defeated. It's as simple as that. Every normal, ordinary, decent person must actively fight against this. It's no good saying, I don't agree with that, and then doing nothing. You've got to do something. And on the 20th of March at 10 a.m. in Glasgow, you can do something about it. Put it in your diary. Be there. We will make a noise. We will show the rest of Scotland that we have some values left. Be there.
My wife is from Poland, and we were discussing all this stuff, and she said, even in the days of the communists with the Russian tanks in her town, we had more freedom of speech. We were not scared as this. This is ridiculous. Why is this happening? When she asked me why, I always believe follow the money. There'll be money somewhere at the end of this. But that's a completely other discussion. But we've got to keep up the pressure. We've got to stay united, and we've got to support Marion and any other lady that comes under pressure. But it's not the only thing that's been happening this week. The newspapers are beginning to bite back. They've suddenly left the side of the SNP, and they're talking about the ring fence money and the famous ring fence money. Where is it, Iain? What do you think?
Well, I've got to say it's a shambles. I wish they could only just get their story straight. 1 minute there's a
Kecky, can you stick up the Daily Record there, the Sunday Mail headline, while Iain and I have a wee chat? There you go.
Well, it's become a shambles. The Sunday Mail's got a story today. The Sunday Times also has a similar story. The story changes all the time. The latest one seems to be, I think Nicola's saying that we have no second funds. We only have one fund, and the money is there. But, what she's not mentioning, when you've only got 97,000 quid in cash, and it's 600,000 that's missing, what you're effectively doing there is admitting that you spent the money.
Yep.
Now, why she can't just come out and say she's spent the money? That would not get rid of it, but at least be an honest position. Instead, she's trying to tell us that the money's in there, not mentioning that you can't have a ring-fenced fund if you spend it in something else.
Yeah,
the whole idea of ring fence is it's spent on a specific purpose. And given that Indian F2 hasn't happened, it can't possibly be that. Well, if it's gone, and it's been spent wrongly.
Well, Iain, here's the thing. I had this discussion with someone else, can't remember who it was, but the fact is that even if they had spent it on, say, in 2017 election or the 2019 election, if the SNP had stayed on track and stayed on being the independent party that we knew from 2014, and that there wasn't the divisions, and they turned around and said, listen, guys, we've been hit with two general elections in quick succession. We've been hit with a European election, blah. We need money, because if not, we're going to have to use the ring fence money. It's all we've got. We can't use that. Help us out. Or we've spent the ring fence money. People, yeah, whatever, you should have spent it, naughty, but they would have replenished it. The money would have poured in. But as you say, they had to tell lies. Techie, stick up the Bridges tweet. That's worth showing. You can see this here. She's actually admitted that the money's been spent. There's no doubt about it. As you say, it's gone. but they won't tell the truth. And truth
she doesn't
seems
say
to
we've
be,
spent it. She's still trying to disguise it.
yeah, but it's still truth seems to be in short supply within the SNP these days, and that's what I find very hurtful. You know, and
the SNP and Truth are strangers at the moment.
yeah, but we mentioned this, and I've got to say he's not, and I wish that, you know, if he's ever listening in, Stu Campbell, come back, all is forgiven, we beg you. Who pointed this out. He was the first one of us bloggers, and you know, the rest of us followed on. He was the first one to come up with this and say, look, the money's gone, there's no money there. And that was quite some ago. And King of Spottyland put up a great a couple of tweets on that today. Techie, can you stick those up and let the people read that? Can you put the full screen? There we go. As you can see that, he's right. We, the bloggers, were telling everyone that the money had gone. We won for a couple of years now. We've been telling you it's gone. And for our troubles, we've been attacked. We've been called all sorts of things, Iain. You know, plants, unionists, the bad bloggers, as that little pipsqueak from Perth and North Perthshire says, paints us as the bad guys because we're telling the truth. We told you for 2 years. We told you that both votes SNP wouldn't work. We told you what would happen, but we were wrong. We were the bad guys. Are you going to listen now?
Well, there's pretty much no doubt who the bad guys are. I mean, they lost all three members of the audit committee. Mm-hmm. They lost the party chairman. They lost Joanna Cherry, all because of the lack of transparency. Mm-hmm. If there was nothing to hide here, it's absolutely patently obvious that no political party would put up with a couple of years of pounding they've been getting on this issue. They would have just demonstrated exactly where it was, where the money was, and that would have been the end of it, or admitted they sold it, as you suggest, and asked to be forgiven and whatever. Instead, they've tried to run a lie. And of course, that's always the worst mistake you can make, because if you're getting chased by persistent people, and I'd like to think most people that have been wrongly and seen their money wrongly used will be persistent about it, then it's never going to go away. And even today, you're seeing them admitting that they've spent it, but not admitting they've spent it, trying to disguise it in statements. But they're basically saying, yes, we've spent it, but they're not actually saying that.
There was
it's just a sign of great weakness and guilt.
Yeah, we got that thing, blog updates on Twitter, folks, where all the bloggers put their blogs in there and we all read them, pass them on, etc. But the Ron Alba put in, it's a great point. He says, I keep seeing articles saying the SNP has total assets of £272,000. The accounts show that fixed assets, office furniture, computers, software, etc., total £416,000. So actually spending money is in deficit by 144,000. You can't spend tables and chairs on a referendum. It's very true. It's very true. There is no money there. And why certain people are still... I mean, that brings me on to Mike Russell, someone who, over the years, the decades, I've thought so highly of. He came out talking about, well, everything's fine. Nicola said everything's used. So just let's stop talking about the money and let's have some unity. Unity? Unity after you've done. You know, and even he then went on to write in his article how bad Alba was, how bad the people who'd gone to Alba were, but he's shouting for unity. He's shouting for obedience and silence. Wheeshed. They want the women to wheeshed. They want the bloggers to wheeshed about the money. They want everyone to wheeshed and just sit back and let it happen.
Well, I think that's the thing. You know, this is the old tactic. I mean, I've lived with it for years. Whenever Labour get into trouble, their solution to any crisis was to call for an all-party grouping, so they could all get together and they could control things and nobody would do anything. The bottom line is Mike Russell's calling for this because they're feeling the pressure. They're you know, it's getting to them. They know they're in trouble. And of course, the best way to get rid of trouble is to call for unity, because people that are naive, people that are well-meaning, just think, oh, well, there can't be anything wrong with just us all coming together. But, you know, the bottom line is the reason that guy that he was complaining about was in Parliament was because Mike Russell and others made the
Stephen Kerr.
ridiculous argument of, you know, SNP 1 and 2 and gave the Unionists Super Saturday. And it was on Super Saturday that that particular gentleman was elected. And he was elected because the SNP were happy to squander 1 million second votes and let Tories in. So, I mean, it's quite hypocritical. He's only calling for it because they've done a wrong and they're under pressure. And B, it's stupid because the very person he's complaining about, he was responsible along with the rest of them and putting them there. Yeah,
and then he was very surprised when he got some pushback. And I'm later speaking to Kenny MacAskill, and likewise, a couple of so-called ex-colleagues, fellow independentistas, had a go at Kenny because of his article in the newspaper today. They went public. I mean, I don't understand the way some of these people act, but then they get all surprised when people push back and say to them, well, you know, you've put these Tories and Labour unionists in. You could have been sitting there with a supermajority. We could have been sitting just now negotiating our independence. But no, they prefer to attack an independence party and allow unionists in. And now we're still the bad guys. I don't understand why they're still directing their fire to the Alba party and Alba supporters when they are responsible for bringing unionists into the parliament.
I noticed Kenny was getting some criticism about his article, but you know, it's a bit like religion. You know, you get various varieties of religions, and then you've got the wee frees, you know, at the top, basically, who are, you know, absolutely down the line. There is one God, one root, and that's the end of it. Let's not have discussion. But in politics, it's a bit different. And I went through this in the early 90s, as did Kenny, by the way. But I mean, we had terribly long discussions on the National Executive about how to respond to what the convention was doing and whether this parliament was coming along. And as you know, we decided not to join the convention, but to stay outside it and put a lot of pressure on it in the sure knowledge it would stop them from being able to backslide. But we couldn't ever find ourselves in a position where we were opposing a devolved Scottish Parliament, because that would have been an impossible argument to make. And I suspect, reading Kenny's article, that's what he was pointing out again this time. That we want independence, that's our prime objective, and that's what we want. But we
I might as well send Kenny home now, seeing as you've answered all the questions.
No, I'm just telling you what I think. You know.
Well, in that religious field, when you're talking about the different strands of religion, and well, I'm from the Church of Fundamentalism, Yahoo, independence, nothing less. That's me. I've always been a fundy, and I remember those. I wasn't on the NEC, but I remember I was very opposed to supporting the devolved parliament. I was against it. I was still crushed from 1979, all these years later, after what we'd encountered with the betrayal by the Labour Party and Westminster. And I wasn't wanting to hold any truck with it. I didn't want to. I know independence, nothing less. To hell with their devolution, their assembly, stick it. I was convinced by a certain Alexander Salmond, who convinced me and many others that this was. But that's a different argument. I don't want to go down there just now because we can't steal Kenny's thunder. Let's forget it. Let's move on. I think it would be impossible to steal Kenny's thunder. Well, we can have a wee dent at it, maybe a wee dent. Yeah, well, you and I have, got to discuss what's been going on this week. And one of the other things was magnificent. The cabinet reshuffle. Wasn't that fantastic? It was. Well, we've got government of pals now. You know, no, it was not one junior minister made it. Not one junior minister made it up. They were all kept. That's it. No, it's just shuffle about the loyalists, and at least there's consistency, because having messed up transport and justice, there we go. He's only a few days in the job, and he was already upsetting people in health. Our Humza. I don't know. Well, I won't even go into his nickname. Everybody knows it anyway. It's well earned. But there's nothing in there that fills one with joy or even confidence. No, and I mean, I hold out no prospect of any advance
in the independence cause coming from this SNP government.
No,
They've got other priorities.
Yeah.
They're not interested. They're forcing through an agenda which never even became an issue during the general election, largely because Nicola and the mainstream media kept Alba out the debate.
Correct.
So instead, they've used all these votes and they're now going to implement a lot of policies that the vast majority of Scots are against.
Don't even know about, Iain. Most of them don't even know about.
Exactly. Don't know about, or if they knew, would be against. And this is the way democracy, inverted commas, is in Scotland today. And it's simply not good enough.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what we were talking at the top of the show about Marion Miller and all that's going on with that. We've got Shirley Ann Somerville, who she's now in charge of education for our children. I can't say that I'm glad my grandchildren actually are not being educated in Scotland, I've got to say. Because I'd be worried if my children... Oh, it's a worry. She's a big advocate of this Thai education and the gender reform and all this stuff. And she's not going to propose it.
All these organisations are funded. I mean, they have created an industry out of all these minority issues and these programmes. And there's a huge number of people are working, and it's an industry, and the average citizen's fighting against this professional army that's been put in place, all funded by us, by the taxpayer. And it's a real problem. And it needs to become a political issue, and to do that we need another political party, because it isn't going to happen through the SNP. I'm so disappointed at a lot of people who I know personally and rated and valued in the SNP, MPs, MSPs, but who have not got the guts to stand up against this. They're quite happy on their salaries or whatever, not afraid to rock the boat, and they're letting Scotland down. They're letting the average citizen down. They're letting themselves down, if the truth be told. But they just don't have the guts to do it, and therefore they need to be replaced.
We are, constantly we're hearing the SNP quite rightly attacking the Tories for corruption and nepotism, etc. And you think, but now I'm looking at them thinking, a wee bit hypocritical there, because we've got lobbyists all over the place. We've got lobbyists in the schools. We've got lobbyists in the government. And as you say quite rightly, the government's funding them. And these are the very same people who are creating the problems. But I'll ask this question because it's one of those rhetoricals, because we don't have an answer. How did it all go wrong? Where from... I'm going to answer one question. From 2014, what changed that the SNP's become what it's become now? I can't believe it.
Yeah, well, it's the leadership that changed, and it's not changed for the better.
No.
Originally when Nicola took over, I was a big Nicola supporter.
Oh, me too. Huge.
Absolutely. I thought she was great, and I thought she was really going to deliver independence. But gradually, I've just completely lost all faith in her, to the point now I'm desperate to see her kicked out. Absolutely desperate. Because in my view, she's completely betrayed everything the SNP stood for all the time that I was a supporter and member.
Yep. Well, my friend, we're coming to the end of our wee stint.
That's good. I'll pass you over to that moderate Kenny MacAskill.
Well, that's coming very shortly. So, but what have you got lined up? You're usually good for telling us what you've got lined up for your blogs, or have you any big exclusive this week coming up?
I'm told I might have one, but I don't have it yet, so I'm not willing to speak about it. But I hope to have one at some point over the course of the next week. Well, I'm trying to come down to 3 articles a week and write 3 blogs a week, but make them all real good ones. But it's not easy to do, because I sit and read a newspaper or this, that, and that, and I say, I've got something to say about that. It's the old plague of the blogger. You get involved in too many things. I'd rather concentrate on this Marion Miller incident and try and move that on a bit, and we'll see where we are at the end.
Yep, we have to move forward with the Marion Miller and however we're going to carry this forward. We really need to move on that. Iain, for the meantime, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Not at all.
I'll see you later on.
You, Roddy.
Cheers, buddy. So, folks, I hope that helped and gave you some enlightenment. And as I said to you, anyone who's wanting to get involved to help, let us know. We need to know. We can talk about it. We can come up here with an idea, but we can't do it on our own. We need the support, and Marion and every other woman needs the support of the entire community. So, as I said, my other guest, I'm glad to say, is someone who's been on the show before, and I'm delighted to welcome Kenny MacAskill back to Through a Scottish Prism. Kenny, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Well, a lot's changed since we spoke a few months ago, but of course then it was just audio. Now we're going all Hollywood now.
That's it. Well, we are where we are. It wasn't to be. I think the Alba concept was right, but sometimes, you can be right, but the electorate, for a variety of reasons, don't listen. And clearly, the SNP, for their own shameful self-interest, didn't listen to us about 1 million wasted votes and instead delivered 1.1 million wasted votes. Equally, the media blackout, which we all know was shameful, which is why more power to yourself, to Iain and to others elbow. But that's where we are. And I think what it means is that the independence campaign is going to have to change its shape and form, because there isn't going to be much happening in Holyrood. It's been kicked down the road with the acceptance that Boris Johnson calls the shots with the requirement of a Section 30, but also with the suggestion that nothing can be done until we're over coronavirus. That is the proverbial piece of string. And my worry is that it's simply playing into the Tory hands. I think I've written about it. I met a Tory at the Count at Ingleston and asked him, is Boris Johnson going to change? And he went, nah, just going to play the long game. They'll string it out. They'll get to hopefully an election in 2023. And we hope that the SNP will suffer a rebuff as they suffered in 2017, and on it goes. So that is where matters have been put. And that's why I think the independence campaign has to be taken extra parliamentary. It's not been delivered by the SNP, and that's why organisations, yourself included, Now Scotland and others, we have to build the base in terms of the policy planning that hasn't been done. It was always a charade. Marco Biaggi confirmed that the task force was a myth, and equally the work that we do need to have on a whole variety of issues needs done. And the organisation and campaign goes on in the communities as we all begin to be able to leave our homes and network and socialise much more.
Yeah, I mean, my main reason for having you on here today is I would like to discuss your article that you wrote for the Scotsman, which has caused a bit of a stir. But just before that, like Iain, myself, you and many others, you're a lifelong, well-known, high-profile SNP man. Your whole life dedicated to the cause. It must have been a terrible wrench for you to walk away from the party and go to a new party. Was it too difficult?
It was and it wasn't. I mean, everybody, as it said, it's the party I think is left. I had good years in the party. I still have friends who remain in the party. I view it a bit like, the passing of a relationship. You remember the good times and, don't tend to concentrate on the bad. But it wasn't simply the opportunity for a supermajority that I think was our big moment that Scotland has missed as a result of the SNP actions. That was our big chance. And we're going to pay a heavy price for it in terms of, what's coming down the line in austerity and indeed in actions by Westminster. But, internal democracy, the drift to the centre, the attack on women's rights, the focusing, the ignoring of issues that I view as fundamental as class and difference between rich and poor, to obsess about, gender and sexual politics, at the same time as ignoring women's rights that shamefully I probably ignored when I was a, young 20-year-old or whatever. Class was the issue as opposed to women's rights. There do have to be trans rights, we accept that. But, what's coming in is an ideology that I think is fundamentally damaging our society.
You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. Just before you come on, I was talking to you and I was talking about the old thing. I was always will be a fundamentalist in terms of independence. And I had to be convinced by Alec and the argument of others and the senior members of the party at the time to accept Holyrood. I was one of those ones that was saying, no, they cheated us before, I don't trust them. And I was convinced by the arguments by Alec and others that, let's slowly catch the monkey, go gradually. And I accepted that. And then as soon as the opportunity came, Alec kept his word with 6 MPs, 25% or 28% were we in the polls he went for it. Now we've got this situation where nothing's happening. But you wrote an article this week, and I'd just like to set it out there, in your own words. Is your first commitment still, absolutely or not, to independence for Scotland as the best destination for Scotland?
Absolutely, I think that's what we must seek, and that's what I remain committed to. The comments you made about 1997, because I was listening in the waiting room, if I can call it, to your discussion with Iain. That was exactly the same. I didn't campaign in the referendum of '97. I voted for it. I would encourage everybody to vote for it, but I wasn't going out to deliver something that wasn't what I wanted. Equally, the concept that I could have gone around areas that I represented or lived in and said, we're not supporting it, people would have said you're off your head. So I think there's two things. Yes, you have to focus on independence, but equally we've got to go forward, because I've also never believed this idea that the worse it gets, the better it'll get for our cause. The worse it gets for our people, the worse it gets for our cause. So we've got to go forward. And that's why I supported devolution, why I'll try and protect devolution, why I think I'll try and enhance devolution. But equally, what I seek is independence. And I'm always minded, because I was watching the Road to Partition on BBC Two earlier in the week. And one of my political heroes is Michael Collins. And I always remember Michael Collins' statement on the Irish Free State was it wasn't the freedom that all nations desire or develop to, but it's the freedom to achieve it. And we used the platform. Those who argued we should have voted no back in '97, I think have been shown wrongly. We actually used the platform of Holyrood. Sadly, that's not being used by the current SNP leadership. And we likewise have to use it and use the platform we have in Westminster to go forward. But equally, we know where we want to get to as an independent nation.
So you're advocating, as I read it, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but you're advocating now that we do a bit of gradualism, and it would be great to enhance the powers if we can. Would that be a fair assessment?
No, I think what I'm saying, Roddy, is two are not mutually exclusive. You can do both, because we've got to do both. The campaign has to change, because there's not much going to be happening in the Scottish Parliament at Holyrood to deliver devolution other than an exchange on rhetoric. Every First Minister's questions, it's frankly stultifying, demands for a Section 30 that is going nowhere. So we're going to have to take that campaign out of Holyrood into our communities. At the same time, we're also going to have to build up the base, because we haven't answered the question since 2014. What is our currency? How do we operate a central bank that's necessary given coronavirus? How do we deal with the European Union now that we're out of it? How do we have a relationship with the rest of the UK? Those are essential to win a referendum. They haven't been done. They won't be getting done by the SNP, given that even Marco Biaggi isn't there. So about time, that the rest of the movement, and thankfully others, are doing that, and Alba will play its part. Equally, at the same time, we have an obligation to go forward. It's quite correct that Neil Hanvey and others should be arguing that the Scottish Parliament should have the powers to decide when to call a referendum. It's also essential, given the correspondence, and I see in the chat box here how concerned people are about Marion Miller. So am I, and I'm deeply concerned about Craig Murray. If that means I have to work with people in other political parties to change the ridiculous position that exists in Scotland on having a legal advisor who advises the government and is the head of the prosecution service, then I will do so. So it's not mutually exclusive. It doesn't mean an abandonment to the commitment to, independence any more than it meant that for Michael Collins. Mm-hmm. But it is about moving Scotland forward as and when we can, in whatever way we can. And we're going to have to build alliances, not just to go forward, but to protect what we've got and to protect jobs and services. That's why I called for a constitutional convention back in 2019, and we've still not seen it. So the two things aren't exclusive. I think making Scotland a better place is essential. Tackling drug deaths, getting houses built, making our better communities. But at the same time, you don't take your eye off the ball at what you want in an independent Scotland.
Because you said in your article, of course, something needs to be done to break the logjam and move the country on, and that's exactly what you're advocating. And you're saying that the grassroots movement should be out there demanding that there should be try and get some kind of convention going, maybe a constitutional discussion.
I think, first of all, we've got to keep hope alive, Roddy. I mean, I look at some of my former Westminster colleagues, and I think they're delusional. They sit there thinking that it is inevitable, that it's just around the corner, and that if they just continue sitting in Westminster, somehow or other, we're going to wake up one day, Boris Johnson's going to say, right enough, the jocks were right all along, have your indie ref, Bob's your uncle, and we've won. I don't think it's as simple as that. I worry that if we don't keep hope alive, then in the housing schemes, people will say, what on earth, what's the point? We voted in 2014, we voted SNP in elections, and actually, the health service is crumbling, the actions of your police service are failing, all of these things. So we've got to actually make Scotland a better place, which means protecting, our people from the problems that the Tories are creating, and indeed, sadly, the failures of the Holyrood administration, because some of these things can't be put at the door of Boris Johnson and blame laid in Westminster, whether it's Marion Miller, whether it's Craig Murray, whether it's the failures that we're seeing on Karl Mack and other such situations. That's actually down to issues that have to be resolved here. So it's about doing both. The cause of independence has to be taken away from the SNP, broadened out. They have to be a part of it because of their size and their political power, but it's got to move out with Parliament, because that's where our people are. We've got to keep, as I say, the visibility and profile and get out there. But equally, we've got to make sure we protect people and actually try and drive things forward and make changes, which is why, in Westminster, if there's some maverick Tories prepared to work with me in addressing the situation of the Lord Advocate in Scotland, I'll be happy to do that, because sadly, I'll be getting more support from them than I will from the SNP group, who seem to be quite happy to allow the Lord Advocate's position to go unchecked, unchanged, when no other modern Western democracy would endure a position where the head of the prosecution service is the senior government advisor. It's absurd.
When you were Justice Secretary, that was not the case, was it?
Well, Alex Salmond took the position, correctly, that all we could do at the minority government, and indeed even the majority government, was take the position that Ailey Angelini and Frank Mulholland would only come to Cabinet on occasions when they were giving advice on particular issues to the government. So the twin roles remained, but they were separated, if we called it, by Chinese walls. You couldn't have changed it as a minority government, and as a majority government, we were looking for the referendum in 2014, and that was the priority. But we're now 6 years on. I also think the First Minister's statement, that this will have to take some time. Yes, there are consequences, and it's not straightforward. You have to make sure that whoever becomes an Attorney General advising the government has the legal rights. But it's not earth-shattering. It's nothing, that is impossible, given it already exists in other jurisdictions. So we've got to move faster. I think the issue has been brought to a head by James Wolfe. It cannot be allowed to be continued, and it has to be addressed. But the Lord Advocate is enshrined in the 1998 Scotland Act. Holyrood cannot change this of its own position. It has to have the consent, because it has to change the Scotland Act 1998. So, a hardline independence, nothing less position, well, we'll have to wait until independence before we can change it. I want to pursue independence and get it as soon as I can, but also want to sort out this morass that is actually fundamentally damaging to civil liberties in our country. I fear for Craig Murray tomorrow. I am gobsmacked and appalled at what is happening, not simply with Marion Miller, but, stickers being put on lampposts in Kirkcaldy. We've got crime beginning to escalate because of a variety of reasons coming from coronavirus. What on earth are Police Scotland playing at that officers have time to go around champing doors because people have been chalking things on pavements or putting stickers up on walls? I can walk around Edinburgh and I can see stickers that have been put up by football casuals. And I don't remember anybody's door or anybody being prosecuted, and they identify which club they belong to.
Yeah. I mean, you've got the famous tunnel in Edinburgh, was it, with the graffiti, which is now a tourist attraction. I mean, it's ridiculous. But to go back to what you're talking about, we've got the internal market bill is something that worries me, and I've tried to get SNP representatives to talk up and say, well, what are you planning to defend against? But while you're talking and advocating more powers, which I support, they're planning on taking away powers, Kenny, surely. They're too. It's not going to work. There's not much chance for them giving us any power unless we really are civilly unrest.
I'm not advocating civil unrest. I am advocating, demonstrations, both, major ones once coronavirus restrictions allow that, and indeed the ones that have always worked well in our communities that are just as important to keep hope alive. I think the short answer is we don't know. The status quo is becoming increasingly untenable. The Tories don't know themselves. We have a majority probably in the Tory group in Westminster who frankly just don't care about Scotland. And, be gone, Jock. They're overruled by those who worry about the union and want to preserve it. So I think the Tory strategists haven't thought through. Equally, we are at a situation where whatever you can say, everybody can agree on is, Scotland is not satisfied with its status quo. And I think removing powers, I worry about that, because I think it will be used to drive through not so much a stripping of powers, but to drive through the agenda that they want in terms of trade deals with, the USA that will undermine our ability to protect our NHS, protect our food and drink, as we're seeing with what's happening with an Australia trade deal where, Crofton could be wiped off the map because of what they're proposing to do. So, what we have to do is try and, ensure that we raise awareness, that we have people understanding what's happening. And, there's got to be flexibility. So you've got to fight, to protect what you've got. You've got to fight to gain a wee bit more if you can get it, such as the Lord Advocate. I've had correspondence with Tory MPs about the position of Lord Advocate. They actually agree. I look at David Davis, who was prepared to articulate the support of Alex Salmond and the behaviour, or misbehaviour, if I can put it that way, of the Lord Advocate in Westminster. If I can work with them, I'll be happy to do so. I do it. I do it in the recognition that he and I will always disagree on Scottish independence, but we can agree that the position of the Lord Advocate is utterly unacceptable, and that is something that we cannot have any we cannot justify Scottish exceptionalism. They've never existed. We get things wrong in Scotland, as the Irish Republic got things wrong and paid the price for the crash of the Celtic Tiger. That's the price you pay for independence. You have to sort out your own mistakes. But there are things we've got to sort out in Scotland and we can't excuse. And what is happening in our, I've trained 4 years in Scots law. I was 20 years practicing it. I was 7.5 years Justice Secretary. I believe in a separate and distinct Scottish judicial system. I think our legal system actually is quite good. There are issues. Corroboration has to go, and why the First Minister has failed to bring it in after Carloway and Lord Bonamy. The position of the Lord Advocate is another. And what is happening now in terms of this attack on civil liberties, it is something I never imagined happening in Scotland, and certainly never under an SNP administration. It is really quite insidious. If somebody had written a novel about Marion Miller, never mind Craig Murray, Mark Custer, Alex Salmond, I would have said it's as crazy as Douglas Hurd's Scotch in the Rocks. Utter nonsense. We're not having Scots with machine guns attacking the British Army. Equally, I never thought you'd have a position where people would be getting prosecuted, have police coming to their door, on matters that are trivial, in comparison to criminality that communities in deprived areas of Scotland face on a daily basis, with violence that still sadly exists, and intimidation.
Yeah. On the legal, one of our viewers is asking the question, Kenny, what you think about the proposal to abolish jury trials.
I was asked that earlier. I actually wrote that once. The only position I've ever been supportive of removal of jury trials was actually in serious fraud trials, which they've done south of the border. And I remember going to Frank Mulholland to say, because my view is serious fraud trials are so complicated, even judges can't follow them. They need to have almost a lay assessor with them. You look at some of these MTech VAT frauds. If you're a lay member of the public and you land on a jury that's going to run for 8 or 13 weeks, not only do you struggle to understand it, but you'd probably lose the will to live if you had to sit through it. But I remember going to Frank, and Frank said, no, we would worry that, defence agents would say, taking away the jury trial because you don't want that. Because that said, you want the opportunity in some serious fraud trials. I have to say, other trials I am less sympathetic with. I saw Lady Dorian in terms of sexual offences. I think if we want to ensure justice in sexual offences, can we just implement Carloway as adapted by Lord Bonamy, who we paid a substantial amount of money, and get rid of corroboration, along with the Lord Advocate? Scotland is the only country in the Western world that still has corroboration. This doesn't mean that people are going to be lifted and charged because Kenny MacAskill or Roddy says so. It means, though, that you're going to get the best evidence, and women and children who suffer where there are no eyewitnesses can actually get access to justice. So, jury trials, I still think that there are situations such as serious fraud, and the other things has been some things in very serious, and they've had it down in England, and we could face it here, very serious organised crime, where intimidation and threats to witnesses, threats to jurors have occurred. And, without giving away state secrets, I do know that we have had trials in Scotland where we believe jurors were suborned, corrupted, intimidated. Beyond that, no. So that's a matter, as I say, where I was surprised, but it shows you, the high regard I have for Frank Mulholland. He said he didn't want it, but that would be the only exception that I would have. It would be serious fraud, which is, even a judge would struggle to understand. Some of these things, you might be, and judges are very clever people, but these things, the following the paper trail is very, very difficult. That's why having an assessor, and certainly for a jury, I don't know how they'd stay awake, or follow some of it. I would struggle, and we'd probably feel miserably to fail to understand some of it. That's how they do it.
Yeah, on staying on your article and forming coalitions of like-minded, it's been used as a big stick to attack both you personally, and I've got to congratulate your wife, by the way. I loved her repost, by ex-colleagues, people that we've marched with, people that we've united. They've used it as a big stick to beat you with. You must have been, I don't know. I know you're, as a politician, you've got thick skin, but it must have hurt a wee bit.
I have to say, no, I mean, that saved you. I just march on. I mean, as I say, I was in the ante-room listening to Iain. There are those who take, the ultra zealot position, perhaps a wee free position. I don't. I think you actually have to be able to read beyond the strict word of God and interpret it, and you have to be able to speak, across, faith groups or whatever, in politics as indeed in religion. Equally, I think the position being taken some within the SNP, that's just to justify their own inactivity. When people are out celebrating their 20th year in Westminster, that's a sign of failure, not a sign of success. And that, again, you have to look, I remember, when we were the minority government in Holyrood between 2007 and 11, we at least managed to devolve air weapons. We managed to reduce the drink driving limit. Now, they were very modest proposals, but we achieved them because we built a consensus in the Scottish society more than in the Scottish Parliament. Labour were driven to support it. How could you possibly, justify kids who were getting, their eyes blown out because of idiots firing off air weapons and tragically kids even dying? And yet, since 2016, I've seen no push. Yes, the focus has to be on independence, but even at the time when they had leeway, where's been a demand for the devolution of powers in whole or in part on the Misuse of Drugs Act? People are dying in Scotland. And yet we have a Lord Advocate who said it can't be done. Well, give us the powers. Have you asked for the powers? We need to build houses. Give us the powers to borrow money that local authorities have. So none of that precludes you from saying that what you want is independence and arguing that on one hand, but at the same time seeking more powers. And there's something remiss that when the SNP had less MSPs in 2007, we managed to make some significant changes, because I don't think anybody would increase the drink drive limit in Scotland anymore, and I think we should be reducing it further, but we need more powers. So as I say, you do both. I enjoyed the road to partition, how Michael Collins was negotiating for the Irish Free State, and at the same time he was instructing and operating the border campaign. You can do both, perhaps not as brazenly as Michael Collins.
Yeah, there's a debate. It's another debate for another day. But the other thing is to get a consensus. Would it be fair to say that our friends in the SNP are they adopting the Bain principle with the Alba Party, or are they cooperating in any way?
As far as I can see, they're out to just, they took us off the committees without a by your leave. The committees were surprised, good luck to them. I mean, Neil had experience in the health service and I had, experience in the legal system. Good luck to them. The committees are overwhelmingly English orientated, so I'm not shedding any tears. But I have to say, in terms of actions that taking Scotland's interest forward, they have are not putting out any hand of friendship at all. We're not going to, play their game. We will seek to cooperate. I made it quite clear. There was a vote when I was down a few weeks back. I made it quite clear to Owen Thompson that I was voting for him. I was happy to vote for the SNP amendment, and we'll still be happy to vote for the SNP amendment. But equally, we're also not going to be hamstrung. We will speak out, because we're not down there to say how wonderful things are in Scotland, when frankly, they're not. There are a lot of things gone wrong in Scotland that we need to set right. Ultimately, we need the powers of an independent parliament, but equally, we also just need to sort some of the mess out that we currently have and that we've got control of. So we're not going to be delusional or indeed denying that there are issues that we've got to get a grip of. And I remember that when I took over as Justice Secretary. I can't blame London, Brussels, the USA or anything else for a culture of violence, for the mayhem that follows after drink, for failures that we've taken, for locking up more people than happens in our counterpart across the Irish Sea. Those are the things that we had to address, and I think we took steps to address them, and Scotland's a better place for them. So we go forward seeking independence, but at the same time, always seeking to make Scotland a better place. And if you can, protecting what you've got, and if you can grab a wee bit more, then you take it.
Just, down in Westminster, you've got to think some of those SNP people must be like us. I mean, we're still independentistas. They must still be independent. Are you noticing any waverers who maybe considering considering their position?
It's still difficult. I've been down the last 2 weeks. I'll be operating virtually this week, and Neil's going down. No, I can't say I've noticed any great difference. Equally, I have to say, I think it's just a sign of new SNP. I mean, I think, I got, I emailed those in my constituency telling them why I was leaving for Alba. I have to say, those who I knew and I recognised the names when they responded actually tended to be more in sorrow than in anger. Some actually agreed. Those who sent me, frankly, what would be decided as abuse, I have to say, I tended to not know them. I had never marched with them against poll tax. I had never been there at factory occupations. They'd never been with us during the 90s or even the noughties. Many of them had joined after Brexit, or certainly after 2014. They'd been in previous political parties before the SNP, and they tended to be the ones that are most hostile. And I look at the current SNP, and what I see is a party that almost has begun to replicate the New Labour Guardian readers. They are committed to, remaining in the EU, despite the fact that there's real difficulties. And how are we going to achieve that? And the SNP policy in the EU is, frankly, I think, I'm unable to countenance it at the present moment. I don't rule out going back into the EU, but we're out, and we've got to go forward, which is why I think Alba was right to seek EFTA as a way in to get the benefits economically and as speedily as possible. So I just find there's also a lack of challenge. All those who are saying to me, resign and fire by-election. What about having some democracy in your own party? When you have a national treasurer that asks for information and doesn't get it, when you have a finance and audit committee that didn't exist when I was the national treasurer, it was just me and the assistant national treasurer alone. When you don't get that information, I don't think it's adequate to just say, oh, well, I'm going. I think that sooner or later you've got to speak out against something that's fundamentally wrong. This isn't just any political party. This is the party of government in Scotland. You have a situation, as I can look out my house here and I can see the bowling club just down the road. They wouldn't countenance a position in the bowling club of having the chairperson and the chief steward being married to each other. It would be a no-no. And yet we have the chief executive of the SNP, the governing party of Scotland, with power and influence, married to the First Minister, and you have a situation where he won't tell the Lord Provost of Edinburgh, who is accountancy qualified, and probably has practiced longer as an accountant than I've been as a lawyer, won't tell him the information that he's entitled to, having been elected into a position by the membership. So, the SNP should get their own house sorted out, because there is a real problem in terms of internal democracy.
That's how I believe the nickname of Imelda has been handed out. But just before we go, just on what you're saying, I'm looking forward to conference, and I will catch up with you. Hopefully at conference we'll maybe get a beer or a coffee, Ken. Knowing me, it's more likely to be a beer than a coffee. But I expect when I go there, I'll know so many people. That's what I know. But there'll be people who I've seen at successive independence conferences, all going back to the days of when we used to meet in the King Robert Hotel up there in Stirling. I remember those days. They were happy days. And that's what I expect. And I look forward to seeing you up there. I just want to thank you very much and for making your position clear on this. And hopefully we'll see you again here sometime soon.
Excellent. Be delighted to. And I look forward to that beer at Greenock Town Hall.
I'll find you. I'll find you. Do we know yet when it's going to be, the conference?
I'd heard they were looking at a variety of venues. I'm probably giving away. I thought Greenock was in the frame, but it might be someplace else. But
Greenock?
Wherever it is, I'll be delighted to go.
Well, I'm going to Skye after it, so that's what I'm wanting to know, because I'm going for a wee holiday while I'm there. Anyway, Kenny, muchas gracias. Thank you. I'll see you soon.
See ya. Bye.
Bye. And there you go. Well done, Kenny MacAskill. I think hopefully that cleared up some issues. It certainly did for me. I think Kenny's made his position abundantly clear. He believes in independence, as always he has done, but he's saying if we can get more powers, if we can sort what we've got, if we can get consensus. But they will still, we know our enemies will still use this against us. They will still say, oh no, you've given up on independent, all the usual stuff. Ignore them. You know the truth now. Spread the word. Now, before I go, if you haven't already subscribed to the show, please hit the subscribe button. We're desperate to go over the 1,000. Opens up all sorts of possibilities for us. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. My thanks to Kenny MacAskill. My thanks to Iain. My thanks to Techie, who is behind the scenes here, moving the dials or doing whatever he does. I don't know. If you can help or any suggestions about how we move forward on the case of supporting women's rights and protecting Marion in the first place and going forward, delighted to hear it. You know where to get me. You get me on Twitter at ScottPo1314. You can get me here. You can get me on Roddy1314@gmail.com. But till we see you all again, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.